with Andrew Jones. What's the name of your company?
Discovered Media.
And so that's tours and
Research.
and documentaries and stuff like that. Right?
Yep.
Okay. So first, tell me how you got into doing this.
I first heard about Mount Sinai being in Arabia. I was a teenager, and an individual came out to Northern California. He did a presentation about claiming to have found Mount Sinai out here. It was a school night. My father went to the session, the lectures, instead of me going, and he came back and said, "Hey, this guy said he found Mount Sinai and all these things." So I went and bought the book, and then I called the guy up. Back then you had to dial 411, and the operator gave me the guy's phone number, and I called him up, and he told me about, I had all these questions as a kid. I kept on calling until my parents saw the phone bill. There was no unlimited phone calls back in the 90s. And so I said, I have to go to Mount Sinai. And it was just a lifelong dream to come out here and research it. And so originally I came out here just as a researcher, trying to see what these people were claiming to be out here. And so I started coming out here in 2016. We got a business visa from a Saudi prince. And he knew this guy, knew a friend of mine. And so we were able to come in on a 5-year multi-entry business visa. And because of that, I was able to go back and forth multiple times. And so I've been back now like 25 trips so far.
Okay, so for people who are not up to speed on the controversy between the Egyptian Mount Sinai and the Arabian Mount Sinai, explain that to us.
Yeah, so if you look at a Bible dictionary or the back of your Bible on a map, you'll see there's probably 15 or more proposed Mount Sinai sites. It's not just one or two. And the reason is because people forgot where was Mount Sinai. And so you have different scholars and others saying that this mountain is the real Mount Sinai. And so you do have a group of people who have looked in northwest Saudi Arabia because it's the land of Midian. And they say Mount Sinai had to be near where Jethro lived because Moses fled Egypt and went to live with Jethro. And everyone agrees that Mount Sinai, the land of Midian, is in northwest Saudi Arabia. That's a given. But you still have those who accept the traditional Mount Sinai, and which kind of started with Constantine's mother. She had a vision that this was the correct mountain peak in the southern Sinai Peninsula, which is part of modern-day Egypt. And so you have these two main camps, basically. You have St. Catherine's Monastery and Jebel Musa over there in Egypt, and you have those looking around Jebel al-Lawz here in Saudi Arabia, the land of Midian.
So the one in Saudi Arabia is Jebel al-Lawz.
Yes, it's
not Jebel Musa.
Yeah, well, so here's what's interesting.
Some people call it Jebel Musa.
Exactly. So, for example, when Ron Wyatt, he was the initial American explorer checking this out. When he first came here, he met a Bedouin, and the Bedouin said, Jebel Musa Hina, here is the mountain of Moses. And this was not something like he put in the guy's mind. This is a local just coming up to him and saying, this is the mountain of Moses, Jebel Musa. So that's kind of
the locals here call it Jebel Musa also.
They do. Obviously, you'll find locals in Egypt saying the same thing.
Right.
But yeah.
But I asked the Bedouin, that guy we were out with in the Sinai Peninsula, I asked him where Jebel Musa is, and he said it's in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually know some Egyptians, and they believe it's over here too. They said, no, that's just a traditional site for the tourists in their country.
So how did St. Catherine's come to be kind of the traditional site for Mount Sinai?
When you go back to the history books and traditions of the church, you'll find that basically when the Christian church became the religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine, his mother decided to go out and find all the different sites associated in the Bible, the main sites. And so, for example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. But one of the sites was Mount Sinai in Egypt, and she claimed she had a vision that this was the correct mountain.
So it was a vision from her, not any scientific inquiry or anything.
Yeah, that's usually how these traditions start. It's like one person saying God led them there, and they just tell others, and everyone starts coming.
Right. So, describe the site that we went to yesterday, where it is, and what it's like, and everything like that.
Yeah, so the mountain peak itself is called Jebel Makla. It's one of the peaks in the Jebel Allah's range. And this is a coastal mountain range um, in the land of Midian. And it's on the western side of the desert being the Hizma Desert. And so this area is very arid. It's a high desert in front of this mountain. And it fits the biblical account where it says that Moses took his flocks to the western side of the desert where he went to the mountain of God and saw the burning bush. Um, and so in the land of Midian, besides the desert, though, you have all these different oases. And so this mountain is near the main Midianite ruins where Jethro probably lived in El Bada, modern town of El Bada. And so it fits the account where Moses would have taken the flocks up into the mountains, a seasonal type migration with the flocks, and then seen the burning bush in this mountain range near El Bada.
So how meaningful is it for you to be able to go back to this place and take other people to come see it?
Well, it was a lifelong dream to come over here and do this research. And then when you see the sites, and we met Bedouins who explained, for example, we're at the base of this mountain, and there's this V-shaped structure that looks like an animal corral. And they actually started explaining to us, without us saying anything, they would tell us that the animals went down this chute, and this is where they killed and sacrificed the animals, and this was where Moses had his sacrifices. It was amazing. Like, this stuff is just all perfectly preserved out in the desert. And being a Christian, someone who believes in the Bible, obviously I believe it's true, and I know by faith it's true, but actually seeing physical evidence, it makes it really special to be there knowing that this is where God gave the Ten Commandments. And then be able to share that with others,
Right.
and bring them out here and see it for themselves.
Sure.
If I miss this, we'll be heading to the Jordan border way over.
So we've been traveling now for a few days out here looking at Jethro's caves, looking at the oases that they likely stayed at when they came across, following the route of the Exodus into Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Can you kind of describe that step by step, what is believed, starting from the Sinai Peninsula when the Egyptians were after the Israelites, and they came down and crossed the sea?
Yeah, so obviously, if you, whatever Mount Sinai site you pick, you then have to fit in the route they took. So if there's no way to walk to that Mount Sinai, then you have a problem with your Exodus route. So if Mount Sinai is where we think it is here in northwest Saudi Arabia, then you have to look at how did the Israelites get there. And so if you backtrack, according to the biblical account, the Israelites lived in Goshen, which was the best of the land of ancient Egypt. And we all know, everyone agrees that Goshen was northeast Nile Delta area by the Mediterranean coast. And that was their starting point. On Passover, they were in their homes. The next morning, it says they left. And they had 3 camping sites until they got to the Red Sea crossing. There was Sukkoth, Etham, and then the actual Red Sea itself, where it says they camped. And that is where Pharaoh caught up to them. So most traditional scholars believe that these 3 camping sites were just one day's journey apart, and so they put the Red Sea crossing right on the eastern borders of ancient Egypt, where there's just a bunch of marshy lakes. And to them, this is where they look for it. But if you look at even historical documents going back to Josephus, you'll find that he writes about the Red Sea crossing being this wilderness area with mountains blocking their progress and them being caught at the sea. And there is no mountains, zero way to get lost on that eastern marshy lake area. And so you have to look for another Red Sea crossing. And so if Mount Sinai is in the land of Midian, then that opens up the possibility of the Gulf of Aqaba, which is part of the Red Sea, is the real area where they crossed over. And there's only one spot on the Gulf of Aqaba that has all of these factors coming together, where you have mountains enclosing a large beach that could fit the Israelites and the Egyptian army, that has a walkable path underwater, and also has a large beach area on the other side of Midian. And so that's at the Nuweiba, Egypt crossing site in the Sinai Peninsula. So from there, then, you have to find a way for them to get to the mountain of Moses. And so from the Nuweiba crossing, You can go inland. There are wadis, these dry riverbeds. They act like natural roadways, and you can walk them all the way to these different watering holes. And Moses knew this area. He was a shepherd for 40 years, and he was taking the Israelites to the different spots where they could get water for their flocks and for themselves. And it was only at Rephidim, their final camping site before they camped at Mount Sinai, where they complained about the water or lack of water. And that's where God struck the rock and it split. And it says in Psalms, rivers of water came out. And that's actually where we're going to today, to go check out this possible site with a giant split rock on the western side of Mount Sinai.
How long do you suppose that they stayed at Mount Sinai?
Well, the Bible actually gives the time frame in Numbers, and they stayed there for almost 1 year. It says 11 months.
Yeah, so it must have been. You could tell just looking at it yesterday. Like, if they stayed here, they stayed here for a while.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a couple of nights, right?
And what you'll notice, like on the eastern side of this Jebel Allah's range, this is the side that has the large encampment where they would have been for 11 months. It's a high desert with green foliage going out there. It's cooler in the summer versus we're going to be on the western side today, which is a lot hotter and lower elevation. But on the other side, you'll find Bedouins living there in like little towns currently today. And this is the area we believe the Israelites encamped.
Okay. So let's talk about the mountain itself. It appears to be burned on top, but we don't really know exactly what caused that necessarily, right?
Yeah, so when you're standing at the base of this mountain looking up, you'll see one of the peaks there, and it looks black with no shadows up there, no clouds. And we know that the rock is basalt. So it's been tested. Basalt is a volcanic rock. So this type of mountain, you'll find these in other places in the world where you have a basalt top to it, like a dark type of rock, and then the bottom, which is granite in a lighter color, pushes the mountain up. And so when the mountain's finally formed, you have a top black and a bottom in a totally different color. What is something we don't know yet is if that basalt is unique. Like, is it different from all the basalt in the world? I mean, I don't know how you would test it. What was divine fire? Like, what did God's presence physically change the rocks?
Yeah.
And we actually have sent samples off to a lab in Israel that has a high-tech nanotechnology lab, and we're just waiting for them to finish their testing on it. We'll let you know, too, if there's anything interesting on it. But otherwise, it could just be like how God's presence was at the burning bush, but the bush did not burn. His presence did not physically change the bush. So it could be that way on the very top of this mountain. But yeah, it's something we're still studying.
It's fascinating to look at. It's definitely, there's a lot of weird geological stuff going on that mountain. I've never seen such an interesting mix of the granite with holes bored through
Yeah,
it.
the wind shape.
Stuff.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it gives
it's all
these
shaped by the wind and everything.
weird
Just
shapes.
amazing.
Yeah.
Never seen a place like that. So, what is your takeaway from what you've seen with the Mount Sinai controversy and what we've seen here in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think if those who want to have physical proof or need physical proof for the Bible, this is something important because it gives you actual sites that match almost 100%. There's still questions like which wadi they walked up, but the main sites, they match the biblical account. And the Exodus has always been something that scholars today have disputed. Like, where's the physical proof that this even happened? It's a myth that was created later by Israel as to say this is how their country was formed. But with this proof being out here in the middle of the desert, I think it's very important for not just biblical archaeology, but for believers and those who are searching for something to believe in.
Yeah. So this new city, Neom,
That's the site.
is
Yeah.
threatening the site. Tell me about that.
So Neom is this big $100 billion project by the Saudi government. And it's basically taking over northwest Saudi Arabia, the Tabuk province that we're in. And it's going to cover most of the land of Midian. And so their idea is it'll be like a high-tech Dubai, where there'll be multiple different types of cities throughout the region They have a whole floating city. There's a city they call the Line, which will go from the coast all the way up into the mountains of Midian underground. And they just announced this next city, which is up in the mountains of Jebel Lawz. This whole mountain range we believe to be the mountain of God. And so you will find, as you're driving around the desert, these brand new roads that they're putting in, and this whole camp set up for the workers. So it's a multi-year project. We're just hoping that they don't not just ruin the view, but destroy anything of biblical significance out there.
Yeah, now when you're talking about things of biblical significance in Saudi Arabia, that raises some problems with Saudi Arabia because, for example, it says in the Quran that Mount Sinai is in Egypt. So by saying that this is the real Mount Sinai, you're kind of disproving the Quran. And that, I think, might cause some issues with Saudi Arabia. What problems have you had?
Well, it's interesting. We had a group with us, and they happened to stay an extra day. They went to El Bada, which is the hometown of Jethro, and they met a French team out there working, doing excavations in the Midianite ruins. And they asked them, like, what do you guys hope to find and all this type of stuff. And the French archaeologist was explaining how, well, we're coming across Nabatean pottery. These are a group of people from the time of Christ, and they were living in this area at that time. But he said, so then my friend asked him, well, are you going to find Midianite pottery, stuff earlier from the Old Testament period? And the French archaeologist said, well, that's a very political, hot topic, and we don't really talk about that. So
wow.
It was just something, this was 2 or 3 years ago. Now, they've opened the kingdom to tourism. So you can come out here as a tourist, and they are talking about this whole archaeological open-air museum that they're going to build around El Bada, which they call the hometown of the prophets, because you have the prophet Shuaib, who is the biblical Jethro prophet, and then you have the prophet Moses. So they're making this open-air museum, but will they go any further and say Mount Sinai is over here and preserve everything else? That's a big question.
Yeah, for sure. And they had fenced off the Mount Sinai for a time. Why did they do that?
So the first American out here was he came out here in 1984, Ron Wyatt, with his 2 teenage sons. They could not get any type of visa back then to come in, so they illegally snuck over the border with Jordan. And on the way back, they got caught at the border and were arrested and taken prisoner for almost 3 months. And because of that, news got out about these Americans who were, here. And so one of the local princes found out about the story, a prince from Tabuk, and he then contacted Ron and invited him to come back the next year. And so Ron came back legally in 1985, and they spent a couple days at the mountain, and that's when they found the cow petroglyphs, which could be the golden calf altar site. They found these wells at the base of Mount Sinai, and they investigated the altar of Moses with the marble columns and everything. And because of that, the local police who had interviewed Ron and had interrogated him the year before, they found out that Ron was back, and that caused a big issue again. But what happened, they ended up calling in the Saudi archaeologists to check out these American claims. Like, hey, this guy is saying they found all this evidence at this mountain. The archaeologist saw the video. He came out to Tabuk and met them and watched their videos. And he actually congratulated them, saying, yes, congratulations, you found Mount Sinai. Please stay and excavate. Ron didn't do that. And so because of that, they told him, never come back here, don't tell anyone. But because of that meeting with the archaeologists, they fenced off the mountain, put up these big signs saying, do not enter. And that's been that way until recently when they started bringing in tourists.
And the fence just got pushed over?
Well, not by the tourists. So in I think it was 96 or 97, a flash flood came through one of the decade storms, and it knocked it over. They never, they fenced off the site. They did nothing else. They didn't upkeep it or anything. So the fence has been knocked down for a while.
So is it still technically illegal to go in there?
No, because the Saudis will bring on their own tour groups. We met many Saudis out there who are official guides, whatever. They go right through it.
Oh. Okay.
And so we even talked to them, like, what's the plans? And before the pandemic, they were mentioning stuff like, oh, we're going to build a pathway for the tourists to walk. And but nothing's happened yet.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So what are your plans for the future?
We're still bringing people out here. One thing we're investigating obviously are the rocks on top of the mountain, see what's going on. If the black rocks have any unique values or properties. We're also checking out the different routes of the Exodus from the Red Sea to the mountain because there's different theories. So it takes a lot of effort to actually go out in the desert and drive around and document. So it takes many trips to come out and do things like that.
Yeah. How many times have you been able to come out here now?
Almost 25 times I've been out here, and then I usually stay for a month or so. And so I have this GPS app that tracks everywhere I go, and I think so far I've driven probably close to 25 to 30,000 miles on the ground here, walking, driving, mostly driving. But yeah, so
Wow, amazing.
a lot of exploring out here.
So how do people get a hold of you if they want to come on one of your trips?
Yeah, so they can go to discoveredsinai.com, and it has all the information there. There's a tour link, and they can read the itinerary and watch the YouTube videos. They can look us up on YouTube, Discovered Media, and they can see what it's like to be on a tour. So,
Awesome. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. We've enjoyed it.
thank you, Chuck.